No? Did you go out last night? Yes. Are you going out tonight? Yes? Okay, that's happiness. Okay, I'm done. Bye now. All right, so actually I'm going to get us started with a little movie. So how many of you here speak English? Good. Okay, I'm going to give you a quiz. Which one of these was recently the word of the year? Shout it out. Hipster? Hipster? What else? Selfie? Huh. Any other guesses?
Foodies.
Empathy. Oh, good point. Empathy. I love that word. Yeah. It was culture. Culture was the Merriam-Webster's Dictionary word of the year last year, at least in the United States where we speak English all the time. So basically, culture is hot. All you have to do is Google culture and you will see all kinds of results for why organizational culture is becoming so important today. And the case has been made. The stats are out there. You can find plenty of support. Organizations that are doing the best financially are the organizations that focus on their people and that focus on their culture. And it's not just a little bit, by a tremendous amount, in some cases 500, 600% higher shareholder returns. So we are listening. We've got the message that culture is really important. In the United States this year, we're going to spend $1.5 billion on organizational culture and engagement. That should be enough to move the mark a little bit, right? But when we look at the past 5 years and what's going on with culture and engagement, it's barely budged. It moved like 0.5 of a percentage point there. So we're not doing something quite right, even though we're listening and we're putting our focus into it. How many of you know him? Yeah, Milton from Office Space. I'm glad some people here are as old as I am. Well, actually though, all of us know him. This is 87% of the world's workforce. They are unhappy at work. They are coming in, they're getting the job done, but they can't wait to leave. Or they're coming in and they're so upset that they're actively sabotaging the people that work with them. And it's costing us. It's costing more than Milton's soul. It's costing us a lot of money. Yeah. So it's about 55,000 hryvnia, I hope I said that right, per employee per year. So we're losing money on these unhappy employees at work. So what's going on? How did we even get here? Well, most organizations are focusing on an organizational structure, first of all, that was developed a long time ago. It came about from the Industrial Revolution. It was about command and control and organization and structure. That's where the word organization really came from, isn't it? But work then was a contract. It was about you come into work and you leave your personal needs aside because it's not about you. It's about working for somebody else's dream. And in return, you get stability and predictability, and you get to live your life on the weekend, and you get a 401k. So that worked for a long time, and we were actually able to scale the world. So we've been successful at scaling the world with this model, but we have to ask, have we been successful as human beings at being great ourselves with this model. And then things started to change. And then things changed again. And pretty much now, change is the new norm, isn't it? Change is happening so fast that we can barely keep up. Whole job categories have become obsolete. We're changing so much that we don't even know what's going to be next. But in all of this change, our needs have changed too. That old contract of stability and predictability, we don't have that anymore, do we? That's slowly going away. So what we need now is to be able to bring our whole selves to work. We need to find meaning at work. We don't want to be somebody else when we get into the workplace. We want to go there and have friends and be happy and enjoy it. So those things are defined by culture. That's why culture has become the new contract. That's what employees are looking for, is a great place to work. And a little bit of money, but we'll talk about that. So what's happening is we have organizations like, of course, Google, that are creating amazing cultures by design. They're designing the environment so that people can do ordinary things extraordinarily well. And this is working. These are some of the companies that are the most successful at organizational culture. But then we have most companies that are still operating on a culture by default. And this is what happens when you're not looking and you're not thinking about culture. It could be a good thing. Maybe you're lucky and you have a good culture, but most of the time it's places where politics and fear and ego take hold, and those drive people. And as you can imagine, they're not having the same impact in those organizations. So, why do I care about this so much? First of all, you can tell I get a little bit fired up, but I've also just had some coffee because I'm on a different time schedule here. Well, it's because I've been through the highs and the lows of this. And I think we can learn a lot from looking at our highs and our lows. It's a good lesson in life. But for me, a high was college. I loved my university. I had friends, I got good grades, I was supported by amazing teachers, I was thriving, and I believed that I could change the world. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get out of college, and I wanted to get a job where I would change the world. And so I got into my first job, and I sat there. I was shown to my cubicle in the corner, and then I looked around. Was somebody else going to talk to me? No. People were just pushing by, barely talking to each other. In fact, they only really seemed alive when they were talking about the weekend. So pretty soon I realized that people were at work in order to escape work. And I also realized that I didn't want to be there. So after 2 weeks, I left, which really made my father upset after he paid for my college. But I went to San Francisco, and I had heard it was different here, and it was. And I decided to work in places that felt alive. So of course, I became a bartender. And I actually liked drinking so much that I became a wine buyer. Yeah, you like that. So if you want to drink some wine later, come and find me. But then I got bored of that. That also wasn't holding my interest. So I moved on. I went and worked in magazines, but then that felt kind of superficial for me. So I moved on again, and I became a researcher on wellness and health and stress. And I thought, this is going to be it. I'm going to make a difference in the world here. This is really important to me. But I didn't get along with the people there. It was not a fun place to be, so I left there too. And then I worked for a startup, and that was fun. And then I worked for another startup, and then I worked for another startup. Each of them was fun. But if we're looking at my highs and lows here in life, what's happened there? Pretty much there's always highs and lows in life. It's when things go flat that you've got a problem. That's when apathy sets in. That's when we lose our dreams. And that's when people are afraid to die. That's really the reason. So right about then, I started to run. I started to run marathons, and then I ran a 50K, and then I ran a 50-miler, and then I found myself training for a 100-mile trail race through the mountains. I was running more than I was working at that point. I became an ultra athlete. Now, it did occur to me at that time that I might be running away from something, but I was busy, so I didn't have much time to think about that until I got injured. Pretty much, I had to stop. I couldn't run anymore. So life is a very persistent teacher. At this stage, also the economy dropped out. The dot-com bubble burst. And I had to ask myself, what is it that I'm missing in all of these jobs? Why am I not happy there? Or more importantly to me at the time, what's wrong with me? Do I just need to accept that this is what work is? And do I just need to suck it up and do that and let some of my dreams go? Right around that time, I met a young CEO and he gave me a book. And he was about to start a company. And it was going to be called Delivering Happiness. And it was about finding meaning and lasting happiness in work and in life. So I jumped on board right in the beginning. And we started to think about how can we help other people find meaning and lasting happiness in life? And what if we started to pursue happiness in a more meaningful way? And so we created Delivering Happiness with the idea that we don't want to be consultants, though. Consultants come in and tell you what to do. They try to know what's important to you, but do they ever really know? It's sort of a temporary solution, so we decided to become coach consultants. We want to help organizations create their own best culture. And so since then, we've worked with about 300 companies in 30 countries, helping them create their best cultures. We've even worked with some of the toughest customers around in Russia. That's on the side over there. This is our CEO with one of the biggest screens we've ever seen, and they were tough customers, but even they got a little bit happier after we were there. So all of this was possible because of another little company that was also in San Francisco called Zappos. Has anybody here heard of Zappos? Of course. Has anybody been there, Mr. Of Course? No? Okay, well, when you're ready to come to Vegas, that's where they are now. So Zappos wanted to do things different from the beginning. They weren't about making profits. That was never their goal. They weren't going to be the number one in selling shoes online, but they always wanted to be number one in customer service. So they did things differently. They offered 365-day returns. You can buy a pair of shoes from Zappos tomorrow, 300 days later, you can be like, I don't really like that, and send it back. They offered free shipping both ways. They offered a 24-hour call center. They did this because they wanted to be number one. They had an idea of how to be number one in customer service. And all of this was working. You guys have heard of the dot-com bubble crashing in San Francisco and all that stuff? And pretty soon, all these startups, when the internet boomed, went bust. Overnight, companies were gone. There were vacancies everywhere, but Zappos held on, and they kept growing, even through this dot-com bust. And then they kept growing, and pretty soon they outgrew San Francisco, and they moved to Las Vegas. So this is their building in Las Vegas. Now, there's not a rainbow over Zappos every day, but something magical was happening. They were realizing that people will forget what you said, and they'll forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel. It's about how we feel. We perform proportionally to how we feel. If you're in a bad mood, you're not going to do great work. So in order to make their customers feel good, they knew their employees had to feel good. So how do you sustain employee happiness? So that changed the formula for them. Whoops. Culture became their number one focus internally. It was all about how you build a culture that's going to sustain emotional integrity of the employees. So, and it was working. They ended up with 75% repeat business. Here's how they did it. What if we took all the money that we would normally put into marketing and we pumped that into making our employees happy? That's what they did, and that's how they ended up with such word of mouth and 75% repeat business. But they also did some other crazy things. They said, hey, we're gonna hire, measure, and we're also gonna fire by values. So there's 2 interviews when you go to interview at Zappos, and by the way, for a while it was harder to get a job at Zappos than it was to get into Harvard University. So you go for your first interview, and that's a skills interview, and then you go for your second interview, and that's a culture interview. Guess which one holds more weight? The culture interview. You can be the smartest person on the block and you won't get hired if you don't do well in the culture interview. 5 weeks of paid training. that includes training on their culture, on who they are, on how they approach things, on their values and beliefs. And at the end of that 5 weeks of paid training, they say, hey, we want to give you $4,000 to leave. Would you take it? $4,000 US, not bad, especially after 5 weeks of training. But what they want people to do is to go home and think about it. Hey, do I really want to be here? And to come back knowing that it is someplace that they've thought about and that they want to be. So they needed a way at this point to encode the culture in their DNA. How do you define something like this? Core values became the way they were going to define their culture. So when you look at these don't look like most organizations' core values, do they? Have you seen those before? No. They look really different. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you can do is you can put your values to the Google test. How many other companies will come up when you Google the values? There shouldn't be that many. It's not something like integrity, honor, and respect. Those, who knows what those mean? These are very specific to them. So, and also, they were strategic. Their core value number 1 is about wowing for customer service. It ladders right up to what they're trying to do. And they actually measure on it too. So for example, number 3, create fun and a little weirdness. They actually ask interview participants, they say, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, how weird are you? What are you, like a 3? 4, maybe? 4? Well, we don't want a 10 because that's like too weird. But we also don't really know if we want a 1 because then you may not fit in with the kind of culture that we have here. And they also measured by it. Core value number 10 is a hard one. Be humble. What are you going to do? Go and ask somebody, are you humble? And they're going to be like, oh, I'm the most humble person you've ever met. I don't think so. So what they did is they have a shuttle driver that usually picks up people, and they bring them to Zappos for their interview. At the end of the interview, they go and they ask the shuttle driver, hey, was this person nice to you? Were they humble? And if they say no, quite simply, they are not hired. And here's where they got, focusing internally on culture and happiness. They've become over a $3 billion company at this point. So what they've shown to us is that not only can culture and happiness help people thrive, and not only can we create a better workplace, but we can be extremely profitable doing it. And so we've learned a lot of things along the way about what makes some companies really do this well and why some companies don't. For example, you need to define your culture to attract the people that will really thrive there, but you also want to repel the people that are not going to work there. For example, Zappos is crazy inside. They can decorate their desk any way they want. There's like balloons, there's streamers, there's plants everywhere, and it's all over the place. To me, that repels me. And to project managers, that might repel you too, because it's not organized enough for me. So you want to attract and repel the people that won't fit in. Also, you've got to go below the perks. Perks are fun. Perks might attract somebody initially to your organization, but what's the meaning behind them? Just putting a foosball table or some beanbags does not make culture. It's the why underneath them and what they actually do for people's behaviors and attitudes that matters. So what you gotta do is ask, what's the purpose of this? And then also ask your employees, ask your team, what do you want? What would make you really happy? Because I know a lot of companies in San Francisco right now that have foosball tables that nobody uses. I bet that's not you though. So at Zappos, they actually moved to a bigger building and they asked their employees, they said, hey, we have some extra space. What do you want? Maybe, do you want some cool coffee machine, or maybe you want, some extra snacks? Guess what they said? Any guesses? You would never guess. If you did, I would be really surprised. That's right, they wanted doggy daycare. They wanted to know their little dogs were gonna be good and taken care of so that they could focus on their work. Another tip, measuring culture is essential. What we measure is what we manage, but it's not all about happiness and engagement surveys. That's a great start. You can also look at some KPIs based on what you're already doing in your organization. So Century 21 is a department store in New York City, and they're an old family-run department store. Their culture is all about helping their people flourish. So if you're flourishing at Century 21, that means you're going to stay there and that you're going to get promoted. So retentions and promotions became the KPIs for measuring their culture. So think about what you can measure your culture on. Oh, and they also put out a culture book. Every year they ask everyone, what does our culture mean to you? And they print it unedited for anyone to look at. And that's their pulse on what's going on with their culture. Another thing we learned, leadership is key. Leaders not only magnify culture, they can make or break the culture in the organization. The best cultures, all these slides that I'm showing you, they have leaders who believe in and support the culture journey. That doesn't mean it's impossible if you don't have a leader, but you do have to get some work done. So this is Phil Libben. He's the CEO of Evernote. You guys use Evernote here? Yeah. Oh, wow. All right. Very organized. I like this. So they've got this really cool espresso bar, but do you think that they have people that they pay to come in and work the espresso bar? No. They work it themselves. The leadership all takes shifts every week behind the espresso bar, serving their employees coffee so that they can connect with them and see what's going on in the culture and understand when something needs to change. So all of these companies here, Whole Foods, Google, Salesforce, Southwest.com, the best cultures, their leaders are committed to it and committed to supporting it. And unfortunately, management can be tough because like that picture I showed earlier of Milton, only 35% of management is really engaged at work. So we've got to find the gems in order for culture to flourish. Okay, so there's some tips for you, but I want to give you really the most important tip. I hope that it's this. The number one thing that we learned with building these cultures. I want to take this down to the personal level. Let's think about you for a moment. Think for a second. What are some of your goals in life? Get one in mind. For example, maybe it's your goal to grow your own company one day. Or maybe some of you want to meet that special person and get married. Okay, you got one in mind? So ask yourself now why. Why is that important to you? And then ask yourself why again. And then ask yourself why again. And the interesting thing is that if you keep asking yourself why is that important to me, most of the time we get to the same thing. Happiness. We all want to be happy in life. It's one of the great unifiers in the world. And it's one of the most common motivators that we have. We're just going about it in different ways. And when we look at the science, for sure, science says we are wired to seek happiness. But we're also super bad at predicting what can get us sustainable happiness. That first donut, it's really good. Second donut, it's okay. Third donut, nah, we're done with that, right? So you can't keep eating donuts and getting the same result over and over again. But most of us are following a concept something like this. I'll be happy when I get. I'll be happy when I get that raise. I'll be happy when I get that new car. I'll be happy when I lose 10 pounds. I'll be happy when I get home and take these high heels off. All things that are good. And I know they're nothing like yours. Those are amazing. But they're all good things, and they give us a little bit of happiness. But this is the biggest lie on the planet. You will not be happy when you get what you want. Those are external things. And as soon as you get what you want, your mind is going to change the goalpost, and pretty soon you're going to be chasing the next thing. So we're really bad at this. And this is how super bad we are. I want to illustrate this concept a little bit with some real-life examples. Take Renee on the right. She just got her 401k from Merrill Lynch. She's thinking, I thought if I saved money, I would be happy. Or take Sarah in the middle. She thought finding love at a young age would make her happy, but clearly this phone call proved her wrong. Or Jacob. He thought getting his new Range Rover with Eddie Bauer leather interior, that was going to make him happy. But it's the wrong color, so he's not happy either. But they're really no different than us, are they? They're looking for happiness, following their own way about it. See, most of us are following a formula that looks something like this. Money, title, status, those will make us happy. When I get, I will be happy. And if we look at the science and we see how that holds up, there's some validity to that. Some money, title, maybe status, those can make us happy to a certain point. But at a certain point, when those keep going up, your happiness is going to flatline. What the science tells us is that the formula is stronger the other way around. When you raise your levels of happiness first, then your level of success continues to go up, and it doesn't stop. And the interesting thing is, if you apply this to work, we see the same results. Every single positive indicator of business is improved by being happy in the workplace. Your sales go up, your customer service, productivity, your revenue per share, all goes up. The only things that go down that have been measured so far are the things that you don't want. Stress goes down. Turnover goes down. Happiness is really like the new engagement, isn't it? So I know you're probably thinking like, this is too good to be true. Happiness at work, sitting around and like talking by the water cooler, that's not gonna work for us. So I wanna tell you the truth. It's not all the same. Different types of happiness are not created equal. The first type of happiness, pleasure. I can give you all a piece of chocolate right now and you'll be happy. But I can't keep doing that, and it's not gonna work over the long run. It's short-term fix. But it's really stable, and we know it works. It always works, right? So we do it a lot. The second type of happiness, passion. Now, most of us have been engaged in something that we're passionate about. Maybe it's planning a wedding. When we apply this concept at work, it's known as flow. That's when you're so involved in a project. You're planning every little detail of it, and you lose track of all time. It's like when basketball players are just making three-pointers, and you ask them later, what were you thinking? And they say absolutely nothing. They're just in a state of flow. So this was coined by a guy named Mikai Csikszentmihalyi. And thank God he didn't name the concept after himself. The last type of happiness is higher purpose. Now, some of us here maybe know what our purpose is, but it's not going to be many of us. Because it's not something that's taught in schools. It's something that we think we're supposed to find. But most of us have glimpsed the concept of being a part of something bigger than ourselves. This is the longest type of happiness that we can give ourselves. This is the sustainable type. But most of us are not pursuing purpose first, and then passion, and then pleasure, are we? But what if we did? What if we set up the culture in our workplace in order to allow us to be long-term happy? In a category I like to call wholeness. Values. These are our core values that's delivering happiness. You saw Zappos values. Notice how authentic and unique they are. Oh no, 5 minutes left. So what's really important about this is they need to be strategic, and then it's all about alignment. For me, I did not get on a plane and fly 20 hours to be here with you for money. I did it because I believe in our core value number 10, that we can create change in the world more than we ever thought possible. That's important to me, and so I live that through our values. That's alignment. The second one, purpose. This is your driver of culture. Has anybody here heard of the story of the 3 bricklayers? Good, I get to tell it. So some worker comes up to 3 bricklayers. He comes up to the first one and he says, "What are you doing?" The man looks down, he doesn't look up, he says, "I'm laying bricks." Goes over to the second bricklayer and he says, "What are you doing?" The man looks up for a moment, looks back down, and he says, "I'm building a wall." Walks over to the third bricklayer and he says, "What are you doing?" The man looks up, he looks out across the yard, and he says, "I'm building a cathedral." What are you building? What is a higher purpose that you're connected to in your job and that your team is connected to? Zappos is not selling shoes. They're delivering happiness. with every phone call, with every customer service that they take, their job is ultimately to deliver happiness. So in wholeness, this is about taking the science of happiness and what makes human sense to create a more human-centric organization. That's basically a place where we can thrive, where we're not coming in and we're being sucked dry of who we should be. So this is a chart, and this is basically the kind of thing that they use to look at engagement and how productive people are being. And all those little dots, those are people. So now, you see this like one little dot over here? You know, that one like little weird dot? That's the weirdo in the room, right? Do you all remember when that was us? Like in high school? If you're that weirdo in the room, if you got braces in high school or you didn't do your hair right, you pretty quickly run right to the average line. Well, that's what we do at work most of the time too, isn't it? We run to the average. We tell people to fit in. But if we do that, if we're all gravitating towards the average, we're only ever going to be simply average. So we need to encourage people to bring their full selves to the workplace. We need to let them be that one weird dot, because that weird dot, that's a high-performing outlier. They're doing something better than everybody else. What if we could all get in touch with that? So we say celebrate weirdness, so that you can bring your full self to work. So there's lots of ways to do this. I'm just going to give you 3 examples about how you can do this. These are all our little weird dot ways. Sense of progress. We all need to feel like we're making progress in life. You ever start going to the gym and you don't see any changes? And how do you feel? You're like, forget about that. I'm not doing that anymore. Same thing at work. If we don't see that we're making progress, pretty soon our interest wanes. So at Zappos, the merchandiser would come in, and it would be 18 months before they got a promotion to become an assistant buyer. 18 months is a long time. What are you going to do in that 18 months? Well, they noticed that people weren't progressing very fast. So they did something very simple. They simply broke it down into 3 6-month milestones. It didn't cost them anything. They didn't get a pay raise until the end, but they had a celebration for each milestone along the way. And people started to see and feel that they were making progress and moved through faster and were happier about it. Sense of control. I know you were talking about this earlier. We need to feel like we are in control over our destiny in some way. It doesn't have to be every way. But when we do this, we understand that we matter, that we have some control and autonomy out there. And very importantly, what happens when someone extends control to you? They're really saying, I trust you. And then most of us will rise to that and take that trust and rise to the occasion. So control builds trust. So this is Marissa Meyer. She's a CEO at Yahoo. Yahoo's a really traditional company, actually. They're not one of the really innovative ones. But she takes control very seriously, and they do it well. She grants every employee one must-have. One thing that really matters to you to have control over in your life. For example, maybe you want to see your son go play Little League once a month. Or for example, maybe when you get really burnt out, you need to go and get out of Dodge for a week. So this helps people have control over the important things in their lives. Connectedness. We are social creatures. We have to be connected to each other. Not being connected is worse for you than smoking or diabetes, and you will literally die 7 years earlier. I'm serious. Connectedness is very important. And the same thing at work. It's not traditional to be connected and have great friends at work, but what we're seeing is the companies that encourage this, they are doing much better. So Zappos has a really interesting way of doing this. That right there, this is their new building in Las Vegas, about 1,500 people, big building. There's all kinds of ways to get in. You can go over the garage, and there's UPS doors in the back, and all kinds of ways to get in and out of the building. They close them all off except for one. The only way to get in and out of Zappos is that front door, because they want people to bump into each other and to recognize each other and to maybe say hello, because it increases connectedness. So, last one, gratitude. Do we have 5 more minutes, or do we need to stop? 1? How about 3? Gratitude is one of these new ways of wholeness that's really getting a lot of talk lately. Our minds see negative things all the time. It picks up a pattern. Oh my God, disaster. Oh my God, worry, grief. And then we start to see those things everywhere. We need to change that. There are good things happening everywhere too. Gratitude just turns us on to those positive things. So, and funny enough, we all like receiving gratitude, right? Who doesn't like receiving gratitude? You're great. Yeah, that feels good. But also, everybody likes giving gratitude. 88% of people say they like to give it every day, but we don't do it. Most of us share gratitude once a year or less. There's a huge gap going on there. So we're going to practice really quick, and then we're going to wrap up 1 minute late maybe. So turn to the person next to you and share one thing that you're grateful for. Go. Okay, some of you are doing it. Awesome. These are the awesome gratitude shares over there. Some people are doing it back there too. All right. All right. Okay, one more thing. I want to leave you with a few tools and tips for next steps for you. So what can you do? Culture is organic. It can grow from the top down. Yes, your CEO can create values and they can send them out to the company, but it also grows bottom up. And this is where you can take control and create your own culture. So here's what you do. Grow it organically. Figure out what kind of culture you like in your team. Maybe you really like a culture of sarcasm, for example. And when you have that in mind, find your culture champs. Find the people that have influence. Find the other people who are excited about this. Enlist them to help you. And make sure you talk to the people at the top, because that's how it's going to really thrive. And also, tip number 2, define your values. How many of you here think you know your personal values? All right, about 15% of you. So we've got some work to do. 16%, I gotcha. So what are your organization's values? What are your personal values? How are you living them? Do they align? What would make you fly for 20 hours to be somewhere? And then if you want a culture book from Zappos, I want to offer that to you as a free tool. It's like, I'll send you an ebook. And all you have to do basically is email me with one thing, and I'm going to tell you what that is right now. So this is where things can change. Basically, we can keep doing things the same. If you go tomorrow to work and you do everything the same, then you are going to get the same results. That's right, Miltons. We have a lot of Miltons in this world. Or we can start to change. It's not about the big changes. You don't need to create values for your whole organization. It can be a very small change. Just 1 degree change can end up someplace very, very different over the long run. So what is one small thing that you can do? Maybe you're going to share gratitude every day. Maybe you're going to look for a way to increase progress. But think of that one thing, and then if you want any of these tools, just send it to me. What is the one thing you will do? And email me at sunny@deliveringhappiness.com. Because together we can make change more than we ever thought possible. Thank you. Maybe anyone